Before you scroll, imagine this. A young woman, lost in the dead silence of a frozen American wilderness, stumbles upon a massive tiger buried beneath the snow, still breathing. What she decides in that moment will uncover a government secret, unravel a corporate conspiracy, and force her to choose between truth and survival. Right finger if you love shocking plot twists, survival stories, and adrenaline-soaked mysteries that grab you by the throat. Hit subscribe so you never miss another story. Amara Wynn had trekked deeper into the frozen Montana wilderness than any sane person would dare during a blizzard warning, but sanity hadn't been her guide in years, not since her brother Liam vanished during a winter expedition and the authorities brushed it off with the same cold indifference as the wind that sliced her cheeks while she pushed through walls of snow. So when her boot hit something solid under a drift and she toppled forward, cursing and spitting flakes, she expected a frozen log or slab of rock, not the striped fur that peeked through the powder, and certainly not the massive heaving ribcage beneath it that told her this was no carcass but a living creature, a giant tiger, far larger than any natural tiger, lying half buried and half dying in ice thousands of miles from where any tiger should exist, prompting her heart to slam so hard she could hear her pulse muffled beneath the storm as she knelt in disbelief, brushing snow off its monstrous face, recognizing the unmistakable signs of captivity on its forelegs. Metal scoring, scars as thin as scalpel lines, and a faint tattoo-like code burned near the joint. Panic rattled her spine. This creature wasn't wild, it was manufactured, engineered, studied, contained, and the realization hit her like the blizzard itself because only one organization in Montana had the ability, funding, or moral vacancy to create something like this. Winthrop Biotech, the same corporation that had denied any involvement in her brother's disappearance, the same corporation whose name had been scratched into Liam's final journal entries before his tracks vanished into the snow 3 years ago, and Amara, trembling between terror and fury, dug with her bare hands to free the beast, telling herself she wasn't insane for risking her life for a predator the size of a truck, but logic dissolved when she saw the injection wound blooming black across its flank, a poisonous swelling she recognized immediately from her wilderness training. It was dying from a synthetic tranquilizer far too potent for any known species. She hesitated only long enough to whisper an apology before cutting open her pack to pull out the emergency serum kit she never traveled without, plunging the needle into its skin as the wind shrieked like an omen above her. And as minutes crawled by, the tiger's shallow breaths deepened, each exhale shaking frost off the ground, its glowing amber eyes cracking open in a way that made her instinctively grip her knife, though she knew it would be useless against a creature of this scale. Yet instead of lunging, the tiger raised its head and, impossibly, pressed its forehead to her shoulder with a desperate, exhausted trust that made her chest ache. She couldn't stay exposed in the open, not with the storm worsening, so she looped her arms under its head, guiding it with short commands the way she would a wounded sled dog, and somehow, impossibly, the tiger followed, limping beside her through the blizzard toward the abandoned ranger cabin she'd passed hours earlier, each step a gamble, each gust of wind whispering warnings, because something about the unnatural stillness in the forest told her they weren't alone, and when she finally shoved open the cabin door with her hip and collapsed inside with the tiger slumping across the threshold, she caught a flicker of movement through the white curtain outside, a figure in black, visor gleaming, watching them before vanishing into the storm. Amara barely had time to barricade the cabin door before the tiger, whom she privately nicknamed Ghost, for the way its white-rimmed stripes shimmered in the dim firelight, began to thrash in feverish delirium, its massive tail knocking over chairs and sending dust swirling from the rafters, and while she whispered calming words and pressed damp cloths to its overheating skin, her mind raced through every possibility, every warning Liam had ever joked about. Secret programs, hybrid experiments, the things he claimed Winthrop was hiding, but none of those wild theories ever included a living, breathing creature like the one taking up half the cabin now, or the terrifying implication that if Ghost had escaped, Winthrop would stop at nothing to retrieve it. That thought was confirmed when the first drone buzzed overhead, its searchlight slicing through the cracks in the old wooden roof, prompting Amara to yank Ghost beneath the workbench and douse the fire. Her heart hammering as heavy footsteps approached outside, crunching over snow with the steady precision of trained operatives, and the cabin walls shuddered when someone slammed against the door, testing it, evaluating it, while a voice she didn't recognize muttered through a radio, "Thermal shows 2 heat signatures, 1 human, 1 large unknown, HQ confirms recovery priority," which made Amara freeze because the phrasing sounded chillingly clinical, the tone frighteningly familiar, the same tone the Winthrop investigators had used when she'd begged them to search for Liam. The tone of people who saw life as data and bodies as property. She pressed her hand to Ghost's muzzle to keep it quiet, but the tiger seemed to understand the danger better than she did, its breath slowing, eyes narrowing with an intelligence that startled her. And when the soldiers finally tried breaching the cabin, Ghost shoved her aside with one sweep of its paw, then exploded upward with a roar so powerful the walls trembled, the door splintered, and the snow outside erupted as 3 armored men were sent flying, their rifles skidding across the ice. Amara scrambled after Ghost, shouting for it not to kill anyone, terrified not only of the soldiers but of what Ghost might become if pushed too far. Yet the tiger didn't deliver a fatal blow. It fought with precision, restraint, strategy, disabling the men instead of tearing them apart, which only deepened Amara's confusion about what Ghost truly was. Together they fled into the frozen forest, guided by moonlight and desperation, dodging drones and evading thermal scans using Ghost's uncanny ability to blend its heat signature with the environment, and after hours of running, when her lungs burned and her legs numbed, they reached a cliff overlooking a ravine where an old communications tower stood crooked and abandoned, humming faintly with residual power. Inside that tower Amara found something she never expected. Liam's backpack, half buried under debris, containing his last field recorder with a final message she had never heard, in which her brother whispered frantically about Winthrop's Genesis project, about a genetically engineered apex guardian designed to protect researchers from predators but later repurposed into a weapon platform, about an experimental specimen coded G0S7, Ghost, and about how he'd discovered that the corporation planned to terminate the tiger after it displayed behaviors considered too empathetic, but before he could help it escape, someone, found him, and the recording ended in static and a muffled scream. Amara collapsed to her knees, the weight of truth crushing her as Ghost approached, nudging her shoulder as if apologizing for something beyond its control, and as she clung to its fur while sobs shook her body, she realized the terrible truth. Liam hadn't vanished, he had been silenced, and now Winthrop wanted to silence her too. Determined not to die for the same secret that cost Liam his life, Amara activated the tower's backup generator, patching into the old emergency broadcast system to upload Liam's final message, but before the upload could complete, the forest below erupted with floodlights as Winthrop's strike team closed in from all directions, armored vehicles crunching over the ice while loudspeakers blared orders demanding her surrender and threatening to put Ghost down permanently. The tiger's low growl vibrated through the metal floor as if registering every frequency of danger, and when Amara begged it not to fight, not because she doubted its strength but because she refused to let it die protecting her, it pressed its forehead to hers and gave a soft rumble, a sound she felt more than heard, a kind of fragile goodbye, and then, before she could stop it, Ghost leapt from the tower in a blur of white and gold, ambushing the soldiers with a ferocity she hadn't seen before, a storm of muscle and instinct, scattering operatives while avoiding lethal blows, buying her precious seconds as she resumed the upload. But Winthrop's commander, a cold-eyed woman named Drive Halden, whom Amara remembered from the day Liam's case was dismissed, stormed into the tower with a pistol drawn, aiming straight at Amara's chest as she hissed, "You should have stayed quiet like your brother," and fired, the bullet slicing past Amara's shoulder as she dove behind the console, slamming her elbow into Halden's wrist, sending the gun clattering away, the two women grappling in a violent tangle of fury and grief until Halden slammed Amara's head against the steel frame hard enough to blur her vision. She felt herself slipping when a deep snarl tore through the tower. Ghost had returned, blood staining its fur, eyes blazing with a protective rage that made Halden freeze, and for a moment the entire world shrank to the impossible bond between woman and beast as Ghost stalked forward, placing itself between Amara and Halden, who raised her hands and tried to command the creature with activation codes Amara didn't understand, but Ghost ignored them all, choosing instead to shield Amara with its massive body while she crawled back to the console and slapped the final transmit key, sending Liam's message, Winthrop's files, and her own location to every major news station, ranger outpost, and emergency network within range. Alarms blared as Halden shouted into her radio to cut the signal, but it was too late. The truth was out, and in that instant the tower's support beam, already weakened from the battle, gave way with a deafening crack, the structure tilting as Ghost lunged forward, grabbing Amara's jacket in its teeth and leaping through a collapsing window, the two of them plummeting into the snowbank below just as the tower came crashing down in a roaring avalanche of ice, metal, and shouts. Hours later, after Winthrop's forces retreated under the pressure of national exposure and federal investigation, Amara awoke beneath the shelter of a fallen pine, her wounds bandaged with strips of her own clothing, and beside her lay Ghost, breathing steadily, watching her with exhausted but gentle eyes. She wrapped her arms around its massive neck, whispering that they had made it, that Liam's story would finally be heard, and as dawn broke over the frozen forest, painting the world in gold and silence, Ghost rose slowly, nudged her forward, and together they walked into the wilderness toward a future neither of them understood but both of them had finally earned. A woman freed from unanswered grief and a tiger freed from chains, bound by survival, truth, and the strange, unshakable loyalty born in the heart of the frozen forest.